Okay, let me prepare to go live before we get started, and then I'll let some of you guys get in here and get situated. All right, excellent. And I'm already muted. Okay, so let me minimize this page and get back to Zoom. Okay, so hello. Okay, interesting. Okay, so hello, everybody on YouTube, and hello, everybody on Zoom. Now, of course, you know how this is done. This is the book club. So let me just give you a little bit of background on how this book club formed. And many of you all know I have this Healing Haven program for people that just want to heal things that have happened to them and want to live their life of peace and mindfulness and all of these wonderful things, being content with your life. So as I worked with this group, the time that we met as a group came to an end. And so we wanted to keep it going. And part of our decision as a group to keep it going was to start a book club about how we can integrate mindfulness and healing techniques in our daily lives. So, all of us experience pain in our life, and you have a choice. When you experience pain in your life, you can either grow from it or you can be stuck. And so the purpose of the Healing Haven is to make sure that we're no longer stuck by past painful memories, that we're able to grow from it and to find love for ourselves and for others, all of that. And so this is our way. The book club is how to integrate healing into our lives. So one book that there's many books out there, but one book that really gets at this mindfulness piece, how to think about our feelings, how to pay attention to how we feel, and instead of reacting to them, how to process all of that in ourselves so that we do not inflict pain on others. Okay, so one way to do it is to look at a book like this about how to be an adult in relationships instead of being childish, because a lot of times when we get triggered, we revert back to childish ways. So that's the whole point of this book club, is how we can interact with other people in our lives and come out of that interaction feeling whole, feeling good about ourselves, feeling good about our relationships, and feeling great about how we are able to experience love without fear, and how we can give and receive love in a way that's healthy. All right, so that's the point of the book club. So for the people on YouTube, if you want to come into the chat and have a conversation with me, ask me questions. So anybody in the chat who's joining me today, all of y'all who are joining me today, you can ask questions. You can type it in the Q&A, and I will, if you questions come up for you, type it in the Q&A and I will address your questions. People who are on YouTube, to be invited into the book club, it's totally free, free of charge, and come and join us. You text the word love, LOVE, to 87948, and that way you'll get an invitation. You'll be able to come into the Zoom, and then you'll be able to get your questions answered. I can shout you out. All of those wonderful things can happen for you if you text love to 87948. Now, so that's for YouTube. I won't stream on YouTube all the time. So there'll be some times where I'll connect to YouTube, but there'll be other times where I just won't be able to. So this is a treat that I'm streaming on YouTube. I'm not going to do that every time we meet. Okay, so we got that out of the way. Before I start into chapter 7, I also want to say, follow me on Instagram, Coaching with Dr. Alicia. And if you want to contact me and work with me individually, you can go to coachingwithdralicia.com, fill out the intakes for couples or individual work, and then I'll reach out to you. There. Okay. We got that out of the way. Can everybody hear me? I just want to make sure everybody can hear me. Let me know. Type in the chat if you can hear me. Renard said that I'm okay. Yes, yes. Okay. Karen can hear me. Tara can hear me. Okay. Let me know if my sound goes in and out. Okay. Yeah, last week, Sonia loved last week's discussion on the ego. Yes, we're gonna continue. We're gonna continue this about the ego. And I don't know, like when I think about the ego, I really do, it reminds me when I think about the ego, it reminds me of who? Freud. Freud was the first person to coin the word ego, and he used it in his psychodynamic approach to the psyche of individuals, the psyche, what goes on inside of you, in your mind, your psyche. So Freud says, let's see if I can remember, you have the id, you have the ego, and you have what's called the superego. And I don't want to go into it too much in depth, but just to let you know, the id is like primal desires. Like, you're hungry and you just want to eat. And it's driven by these primal desires. The superego is becomes evolved in you, and it's based on culture, based on how you were raised, and it is about moralistic demands of the superego. It's about how things should be, right? But the ego is what balances the id and the superego. So when Freud, in this book today, he's going to talk about it in terms of the arrogant ego. So the topic of today is the anatomy of the arrogant ego. Okay, but Freud called it inflated ego. You have this exaggeration, this inflated sense of self-importance, how you exaggerate. Freud talks about the exaggeration of the ego, and all of that stems from deep-seated insecurities and unresolved conflicts in the psyche. You were never able to process how you feel, what you were thinking. It's unresolved, and you internalize that and feel like there's something wrong with me. And you have these insecurities. This is why it is so important when you have children that you have a space for them to process what's happening with them. We all go through our daily activities and we have situations where we feel rejected, situations where we do things wrong, where we make mistakes, where things happen along our journey of growth, but you need a place to talk about that. And if you don't have it, you internalize it and think there's something wrong with me. So this is kind of oversimplistic explanation, but I just wanted to let you know where this ego comes from. And so underneath the exaggeration of the ego, underneath that are compensatory behaviors. And that's why Freud came up with the defense mechanisms. So Psychology 101, that is what we are going to get into today. What happens when the ego is inflated? And according to David Richo in How to Be Adult in Relationships, David Richo is saying, you can't be mindful if you're walking around arrogant. Arrogance and mindfulness can't exist at the same time. Okay, and we're going to talk about why today. Why is it that being arrogant and mindfulness can't exist in the same space? And if you're not being mindful and you're not being connected to who you are and what you are and your own insecurities, how are you going to be connected to somebody else? How are you ever going to have healthy relationships? You will never have a healthy relationship with anybody if you're arrogant. So that's what we're going to talk about together. Yes, thank you. Vinegar and oil. So let's get started. There's quite a few pages I want to get through today, and I'd like to get us out in under an hour, but I don't know. I may get to run in my mouth and I may end up going longer than an hour. But So be it. We got to get into what arrogance means. Okay, so we're going to start here on page 197. It's the anatomy um, of the arrogant ego. So we're going to start here. And then let me turn to the light because, I got to, I got to look at the light. Okay, so he starts with the big ego appears in statements like, I'm right. So if I'm right, what does that mean? That means you're wrong. If you see conflict in terms of I'm right and you're wrong, that's a sign of arrogance. Okay. My way is the right way. I'm never wrong. I ain't wrong about anything. Arrogance. There is no need for me to change. I'm entitled to special treatment. So you think you always right. Y'all know people like this who are arrogant like this? People who think they always right. They think their way is the right way. They ain't never wrong. It ain't never them. It's always everybody else, never them. There's no need for me to change. Huh. They ain't changing. So if you have a conflict with them, they look at you and say, I'm not changing. So be it. What? Oh my gosh. Ha, ha, ha. I'm entitled to special treatment. Y'all know people like this. We fear changing. You fear changing because it may mean that you have to admit that you're wrong about something and grieve a loss of something that we valued in ourselves or of a sense of safety. It boils down to the fear of closeness. So he's saying that arrogant people are have a fear of closeness. Hmm. If I soften and open myself to others, they will get too close. So arrogance builds a wall. So if you think you always right, then you're not interested in being vulnerable. You're not interested in closeness. You may want it, but you're putting up walls. Okay. Um, you can't tell me anything is the same as you can't get too close. You can't get close enough to affect me. We may act our fear of closeness out as stubbornness. Y'all know stubborn people? Stubborn people are afraid of closeness. You ever thought about it in that way? This is really helpful because it's frustrating dealing with people like this. They ain't never right, they ain't never wrong. They always want things their way. It's hard. Yeah, okay, Varnell's saying maybe narcissism. It could be, but not always. It could just be somebody who's just afraid. They're afraid of closeness. They're not conscious of it. They're not aware of it. It comes across as arrogance. Okay, so stubbornness, refusal to cooperate, inflexible, need to win or to be right. They're not flexible. They always want to be right. They always feel like they got to win. Everything is about winning and losing. An inability to admit we are wrong or an inability to apologize. How many people do you come across that has a trail of failed relationships and they blame it on feminism? Y'all know people like that? I don't know. I was talking to my husband and I was talking to him about how concerned I was because I noticed he was on these kind of red pill discussions. But then I realized that he didn't necessarily agree with red pill movements, but there's movements of men online who blame their divorce on feminism. No, it's not feminism. It's because you are an arrogant asshole. That's why your wife left you. You're arrogant. You're not flexible. You always feel like you have to be right. You can't listen to anybody. You always think you can't apologize to anybody. You're arrogant. That's why your wife left you. It is not modern society. It's not Western civilization. It is not feminism that broke up your marriage. It was you being arrogant. How about that? And guess what it means? Underneath it all, those people who blame their divorce on the feminism are insecure and they're scared. Men who do that are scared of being vulnerable. Now, we can talk about it in terms of women. Women who get online and say men ain't nothing and all you want from men is money, and they feel like they're entitled to a man's money. I'm entitled to your pocketbook if you're interested in dating me. What? That's arrogant. And then they wonder why they can't find a man. You ain't gonna never find a man. Real men are never gonna want you or never take you seriously if you feel like just because you're a woman, you're entitled to a man's pockets. He doesn't owe you nothing. You show up as yourself. Y'all laughing. Y'all are funny, but it's true. You're not entitled to special treatment. And it's funny because it's some of these women I see feel like they're entitled 100% to a man's money, but they're not giving anything in return. Like they're not really. I mean, okay, in the bedroom. Maybe you feel like it's in the bedroom, but really you're not entitled to anything. What you gonna do? You're gonna cook for him? You're gonna treat him like a husband? You want to be have wife privileges, but then you don't want to give wife activities. I don't know. So, but what you need to see it, you need to understand that what it does, it creates distance and arrogance underneath it all. Those men, those red pill men underneath it all are scared little boys. They are afraid of being insecure. Those women who claim up and down all they want is man pockets, cash out me money for lunch. Underneath it all, they're scared little girls who've been hurt and never resolved it. Thank you, Karen. What's his is mine, and what's mine is mine. What type of thinking is that? What kind of thinking is that? Just stop it. The man may not be interested in you because he wants connection. Real men want connection. Thank you, Sonia. It's selfishness. Oh, I think Sonia's quoting Karen. It's selfish. You're acting like a child. Okay, I think y'all got it. Let's move on. Okay. Um, the arrogant ego fights intimate love. The arrogant ego fights intimate love because we keep trying not to lose face. Okay, so think about it this way. If you're scared, if you have a fear of closeness, you use arrogance as a shield to protect yourself. So it makes sense. Maybe there's some hurt going on that you haven't resolved. It's unresolved in the psyche and it shows up as arrogance because underneath it all, that's what it is. So the arrogance becomes a shield of your fear of closeness because you're scared you're going to get hurt. Remember, you're a hurt little boy, you're a hurt little girl. You don't want to lose face. And he talks about face in this way. This FACE of the inflated ego is fear, attachment, control, and entitlement. That's face. The most vicious enemies of intimacy. Vicious, and you ain't never gonna be close to anybody. You'll never have intimacy. Okay, we cannot give someone, oh wait, here we go. Ah, face, inflated ego. Okay, it's the most vicious enemies of intimacy. The self-centeredness of entitlement keeps us from giving anyone our attention and appreciation. So, if you're being self centered and you're not thinking about anybody else, because really what you need to center is love. We talked about that last week. Your ego needs to be centered in love. But if it's not, if it's centered in your fear of closeness, then you'll never have the attention you desire and you'll never have appreciation. Self-centeredness of entitlement keeps us from giving anybody our attention and appreciation. You can't appreciate what somebody has to give you when all you're thinking about is yourself. You cannot give appreciation. You cannot give attention when it all has to be on you. We cannot give someone our acceptance and allowing when control takes precedence over equality, or when we get too attached to our own version of reality. You can't step outside of your reality to see where someone else is coming from because you're so busy trying to control everything. So being controlling will never let you accept. You can't accept anybody for who and what they are. There's no acceptance and there's no allowing if you're interested in just controlling somebody. We cannot easily show authentic affection to somebody when we are driven by fear. Ain't no hugs and kisses going on when you're scared. And it's an illusion. Fear is an illusion. So Varnell has a question. Question is, how does a walled off person like that get in a relationship in the first place? Well, maybe at the beginning. Maybe at the beginning when it's surface level, but when the relationship, Sonia has a quick answer. Yeah, it's surface level. Because remember, Varnell, when you enter into a relationship, and you fall in love with that person, you don't really fall in love with that person. You fall in love with your projection of that person. You're projecting yourself, your hopes and wishes onto another person. That's called lust. Thank you, Sonia. You're projecting, but you don't really see that person for who and what they are. You're not going to see them unless you have conflict. Conflict is mandatory in a healthy relationship. So if you're walled off, you're never going to get to know somebody. So you're never going to have a real relationship in the first place. It's fake. Fake relationship. If you're not being vulnerable with somebody, if you're not dealing with conflict in a healthy way, you're never going to get to know another person. Conflict, I had a whole chapter, probably like 8 to 10 videos I've done just on conflict because we're scared of conflict. Remember, our association with conflict is always somebody screaming and yelling and throwing their shoe at somebody and kicking them out in the middle of the night, sometimes fighting, yelling. It's a very scary thing for some of us. And my challenge to everybody is to shift the way we look at conflict. It's inevitable. You should welcome conflict because it doesn't have to be an argument. Okay. Good question, though. That's a great question. Great question. Okay. We move on. We fear, usually unconsciously, not finding approval or not getting our way. We are attached to our version of how life and others should be, And we may become stubborn, just attached. It must be this way. You're not flexible. We become stubborn. We demand control over others and over how things turn out. That's an illusion, right? We believe we are entitled to be loved and honored by everyone and to exact reprisals if we are offended. So the need to be in control, because the reality is that you can't control anything. You need to let go. The only thing you can control is yourself. You can't control anything. You can't control nobody. You can't control your mom. Believe it or not, you can't even control your children. You can't control anybody. You can only control yourself and how you choose to respond to things. That's a reality. Okay, let's move on. The ego is not a stable identity. Hmm. It is an assumed identity based on injury or love that we respond to with fear, attachment, control, or entitlement. Huh. Face. That's face. So the ego is not a stable identity. It is an assumed identity based on injury or love that we respond to with fear, attachment, control, or entitlement. Since any of these reactions happen so habitually, we imagine it is who we are. So sometimes, oh, that's what happens. Yes, that's what happens when your defense mechanisms kick in and you attach yourself to the defense mechanisms. So, what's a good defense mechanism? Denial. One that I use a lot is intellectualization. I intellectualize things. Things that hurt me, I tend to intellectualize because I don't want to attach myself to the pain. I want to avoid feeling pain, so I'll intellectualize things. And so sometimes you can attach yourself to that defense and say that's who I am, but it's not the core you. And that's what therapy does. Therapy breaks down the defenses, and then you can choose a different pattern, by the way. You could choose to do something different once you face your fears instead of your defenses. Okay. Thank you, Freud. Freud did an amazing job in that way. Okay. Um, we confuse rejoinder with agency. Instead, our ways of behaving can be observed in the mindful space of bare attention. That space is who we are, not the strategies that attempt to fill it. The strategies, those are the defense mechanisms that you use. Those are the strategies to fill it. Thus, in mindfulness, we can use pain or love in a new way to bring our ego into focus so we can understand how we're using our ego. Oh my God, I'm being really flexible. I'm being inflexible. I'm being arrogant in this way. And to take a look at that. That shift of attention to the man behind the curtain is how we finally snap out of our mesmerized stare at the wizard of ego. They call it the wizard of ego. Let's pause because I think this paragraph is probably, that's heavy. It's a lot. I think I'm going to kind of like take that a little slower. Okay. So he's saying that the ego is not a stable identity. Oh, so the ego is not stable or consistent identity. So the ego is a construct shaped by our thoughts, our experiences, our emotions, and it shifts. So it's not stable in response to changing circumstances. Okay, so suppose, how does the ego function? Suppose I go to the grocery store and I just throw on some clothes. Maybe I haven't done laundry and I take some pants out that's not clean or something. And I just put a shirt on and I just go to the grocery store and somebody sees me and I don't have a dirty top on. Well, my ego tells me, it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to the grocery store. It don't really make a difference. I'm explaining it away instead of owning the fact that I made a mistake by wearing an item of clothing that was unclean. So it's how the ego is how we explain away things. We explain away things to make it outside of us instead of saying, I picked the wrong shirt. I should not have a wrong shirt. Yes, make sure you have a long sweater. Is that what happens? Yeah. So, it's the rationalization that you give yourself when you make a mistake. So that's what the ego does. Instead of saying, I made this mistake, I probably should do better next time, you just kind of talk yourself out of things. So that's what the ego does. But what he's saying is that the practice of mindfulness, that is how we engage with pain or love in ways that transcends these patterns of ego defense. So sometimes we have to recognize when we're doing it and then choose to do something else instead. Okay? So what happens is that we sometimes we use pain. Suppose your partner does something to make you mad, okay? You can choose to be bitter about it. You could choose to be resentful about it. Or, or you can choose to be self-centered about it. But in mindfulness awareness, you pick these experiences and you allow them to work through it. You can say, why is this bothering me so much? There's feelings of anger. So you shift your attention away from focusing on what he's calling the man behind the curtain. Okay? You have to do this for yourself. Nobody can do this for you. So just like the Wizard of Oz, y'all seen the movie Wicked? Y'all see the movie Wicked? So remember how being arrogant is like a shield, but behind the shield is a scared person, is a child that was hurt, but you put this arrogant shield up to protect yourself. So what does this mean for the Wizard of Oz? The Wizard of Oz, he's scary. He's blowing smoke out of his mouth. He's, all of this pretending to be powerful. That's arrogance, pretending to be something that they're not. But behind the shield, behind the face, who did we see? Who was the wizard really? The wizard didn't have no power. Dorothy had all the power. It's fake. Thank you. Thank you, Annetta. Beautiful. That's what happens. So, behind the curtain is where you feel insecure. Noticing these dynamics loosens your grip of the ego. When you put it down, when the Wizard of Oz actually put down his fake face, your fake mask, the arrogance, when you put it down, and then you start realizing that you have to lose your grip of this fake ego and get in touch with what's really happening with you. Maybe you are insecure about something. Maybe you're unsure about something. Maybe you're afraid of getting close. Why? Because the last person I got close to hurt me in some ways, and I never got to process that. So, this is what David Rico in this one chapter is asking y'all to do. That's your challenge. Where in your life are you putting up a shield to protect yourself and not being authentic to you? It is everybody's job to do this for themselves. I know y'all are listening to me talk and you're thinking about other people, but stop thinking about other people who do this. Think about how you're doing it in your own life. Pay attention to that. Where is it? Because the Wizard of Oz and Wicked, that is not about anything outside of you. That's a process that all of us go through within ourselves. So the Wizard of Oz is just a manifestation of the ego. And we have to shift our attention instead of putting up the shield, instead of putting up the fake mask of entitlement, of controlling other people, of trying to be scary and blow fire out of our mouth to scare other people. Redirect that, put that shield down, and focus on the man behind the curtain. That means you have to focus on what you're really scared of and why. I think y'all got it. That's heavy. I love the movie. I love The Wizard of Oz. I absolutely loved Wicked. Anything that has to do with that story is absolutely beautiful. So I think it's so important for all of us to know this. Okay, so The Wizard of Oz, the man behind the curtain, that is you getting in touch and being vulnerable with yourself. That's what you owe it. Shifting the attention away from always being right and realizing that sometimes you can be wrong. Sometimes you need to apologize. You need to look at yourself. And sometimes, instead of being stuck, you need to grow. You need to look at yourself and examine what you're really afraid of because people live miserable lives when they're not able to do this. Oh my goodness, how y'all doing? Okay, I want to say hello to everybody. I want to say hello to YouTube. I just want to let YouTube know if you want to get in the chat and have me um, shout you out and answer your questions. Oh, there's a question in the Q&A. If you want to be able to come in, I'll shout you out. You can answer question, you can ask your question and I will answer it. Be sure to text LOVE, LOVE, to 87948. And all of y'all that are, and then you get a special link of how to join me in the Zoom webinar. And then I want to say hey to everybody. How y'all feeling? Hello, hello. Come from behind the curtain. Yes. Hey, Jen. How you doing? Black on the platform. I love it. And where's our gentleman? What's his name? Ernie or... I can't remember. He was supposed to come back and let us know if we gave him homework. So we wanted him to come back after he did his homework and let us know, but I don't know. He's not back in here. So if you're in here, you got to let us know. I can't remember his name though. I felt like his name was Ernie, but I could be wrong. I don't know. It started with an E. But if I saw his name, I would be able to. Yes, the date. He's supposed to go on a date with his wife. Yes, Sonia, but I don't. Otis. Thank you, Olympia. We don't see Otis. I thought it started with an E. Otis is not in here. Where's Otis? Let me see. Can I see who's in here? Um, Let me see. Otis. No, no Otis. I don't see Otis in here. Anyway, so maybe Otis will come in. I see a question. Let's see what the question is. Hey, Eric. Okay, so Eric is asking about depression and sadness. It just hits me out of nowhere. Yeah, so if that's interesting, depression and sadness is really the most common sort of symptom that brings people into a therapeutic environment. And contact me because, yes, I do work with depression and people who have depression, sadness, negative thoughts. Because I'm thinking depression means you're sad and you can't get out of it and you have this negative thinking. So, yes, Eric, I do work with people who are sad. A lot of people are sad, and the goal is to get to a point where you're content with your life. Okay. Usually sadness happens when someone lies to you and you start to believe it. That's basically sadness in a nutshell. Um, uh, I mean, we all have things that we're sad about, but if it sticks in you and it's there, then that means there's some negative thinking associated And so that goes into the area of depression. There's a lot of things. I can be sad about a lot of things, and I am sad about a lot of things. But if it stays with you and you can't kick it, and it starts to have an effect on your thinking, your feeling, and getting out of bed and all of that, then it comes from, it leads into things where, you just can't overcome it on your own. The negative thinking makes you really depressed. So yeah, good question. Good question there. Oh wait, and there's another question. Let's see. Okay. How do you address people who have a lot of items and have difficulty discarding stuff? Oh, the hoarders? Yeah, so that's interesting. How do you think positive? Okay, I got a lot of questions here. Okay, let's answer Juaneta's question. How do you address people who have a lot of items and have difficulty discarding stuff? That's a real problem. There are a lot of people who are hoarders, and we all know it is emotional. It is definitely emotional. And it's funny because people who are hoarders, they're hoarding emotions that they're not able to process. And they're not being mindful in how they process things. So it is a connection. And it's funny because you watch these shows. There's a show, I think it's on Lifetime or something, where they follow people who are hoarders and they clear out their house and get rid of stuff. And then what's going to happen if they don't deal with the emotional stuff? They're going to start hoarding again. So you have to like start paying attention to that and seeing. It happens with a lot of older adults have a lot of hoarding behavior. Um, and it is problematic and can be an issue. Okay, so we got more questions here. Wait, there was a question. There was another question. Let me see. Oh, how do you think positive? Well, thinking positive is not something that you could just do overnight. I think that a technique I use is cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy in dealing with depression is 95%. You have a 95% cure rate. So depression is curable, but 95% with just cognitive behavioral therapy and maybe some drugs. Maybe there's some drugs that you can take, like prescribed medicine you can take to help you, but that's temporary. So cognitive behavior therapy has a 95% recovery rate. So, yeah, there is a way to deal with it. And the best way to deal with it is cognitive behavior therapy. So, what does that mean? Cognitive. That means what's your thinking process? Where did it come from? Who lied to you? Who told you these things? And why did you start believing them and internalizing them? And it is confronting the negative thinking. So it's not just thinking positive, it's confronting some of the negative thoughts. Where did those thoughts come from? Can you identify it? And it takes a process, being aware of how you feel, connecting feelings to thoughts, and how you behave. So it's almost like a triangle. There's thoughts, there's feelings, and behavior. And sometimes we have to connect the dots there and process that. And then you can start kind of shrinking down the negative thinking and replacing that with positive thinking. So it's a process that takes place. Okay. How does the ego develop? It develops when you're a little toddler and you're asserting yourself. So the ego develops when you're a toddler, and you start to assert yourself there. Okay, Jen, I used to hoard stuff due to abandonment issues. Yeah, some sort of trauma in people's past that haven't been worked through. I worked through it and let go of the physical items. How did it feel, Jen, when you let it go? I have been decluttering for 10 years now. It is a process. Yeah, it felt good, didn't it? Did you feel lighter? Did you feel heavy? Um, observe your thoughts, replace the negative thoughts with positive self-statements, affirmation, reprogramming the brain. Yes, it's liberating. Yes, Jen. Thank you. So it works. We gotta testimonial right here. It absolutely works. So there's no reason why people can should be walking around feeling clinically depressed because the answer is there. And it's simple answer. It's not an easy answer, but it's simple. And if you do the work and trust the process, you can live a life that's very content. Yes. Yes, Karen. Hey, hey, everybody. These are good questions, by the way. I love the questions. Um, okay, let's move on. We're going to talk a little bit about trust. Uh, let's see, where am I? Okay, the Wizard of Ego. I love that. The Wizard of Ego. Okay, at the bottom of page 198, that's where we're going to start here. Okay, we need a FASE, a facelift, so that fear can become excitement. Then we may act with fear, but not because of it. We can act with fear and not because of it. And we are no longer afraid to show our fear or our vulnerability. Ooh, which is the vulnerability that is a given of existence, not the vulnerability of a victim. Such healthy vulnerability is more likely to emerge when our own sense of inadequacy and shame about it vanishes. And then we trust that in showing it, it can run no risk of humiliation. Oh my God. This is another. What is David Rico on? He is really nailing it. Oh my God. This is so good. Okay, let's break this down a little bit. When we need a facelift, so that means we need to let go of fear, attachment, control, and entitlement. A facelift, so that fear can become excitement. This means that fear is not holding us back, that fear is motivating us to learn about ourselves and to connect with other people and to know that we can do it. And you might have a little bit of fear, but it's not crippling you. Hi. Okay. Then we may act with fear, but not because of it. Hmm. Um, and we are no longer afraid to show our fear or our vulnerability, which is the vulnerability that is a given of existence. It's a given. That means everybody in this world, we're all in the same boat and we're all struggling with the same thing. It is a human existence that everybody goes through. We're all afraid. We all have a little bit of insecurities. We all have areas in our life that we feel worried about and scared about, but it shouldn't hold us back. It should be excitement to us. So when fear becomes too big in our lives, we're stuck. But it's a given of existence. Hmm. Like the cowardly lion, right? Remember the cowardly lion? He was afraid, but he was the lion. All of us are the lion. Even though we may have some fears, we are the king of our jungle. And so it takes courage to move forward anyway. It's a given of existence, it's a human experience, not the vulnerability of a victim. So you're not a victim. This person did this to me and treated me this way. That's vulnerability of a victim. But vulnerability of your worries. Are you able to say to your partner, when you didn't pick me up on time, I felt really afraid and it brought up feelings of abandonment? Can you say that to your partner? Or are you going to say, when you didn't pick me up on time, you made me stay out there, something bad could have happened to me, and then you start getting into this victim thing? But having a conversation about how you felt being vulnerable with your partner, vulnerable with people who are important to you, that increases connection. Okay. Such healthy vulnerability, he calls this healthy vulnerability, is more likely to emerge when our own sense of inadequacy and shame about it vanishes. And when we trust that in showing it, we run no risk of humiliation. You can't tell everybody everything. If it's a trusted partner and you made the commitment to be an adult in a relationship, you understand that it's a universal human experience that all of us have. Just a human experience. You're being human. Okay. It is understandable that vulnerability is scary. After all, it involves not only showing our wounds, our need for others, our limitations, it also requires entrusting all those into the hands of another. Woo! Let's use the analogy of sustaining a serious wound to our arm. Okay, so you hurt your arm and going to the emergency room where we are seen by a doctor we don't even know. So you're trusting a doctor to help your wounds in your arm. You don't even know. We show the doctor our wound and we place it and ourselves in their hands, her hands, hoping for a good outcome. We are required to use those same two gestures when we are vulnerable. We show and surrender before we fully trust. We trust a doctor that we don't even know. We're in the emergency room and we hurt our arm, and we just have to trust that the doctor has the credentials. We trust that this hospital hired this doctor who's licensed to practice to x-ray our arm, to treat our arm. And to do that, you have to pull back your shirt. Sometimes you got to take your whole shirt off. Really be vulnerable. Nothing's more vulnerable than sitting on one of those examining tables and it's cold and you got no clothes on and you got to show your arm. You have to be vulnerable or your arm will never be fixed. You even have to undress. And this is what trust means. Trust is inherently difficult because it is required for us to expose our vulnerabilities to another person. And to do that, you have to relinquish control over how they may respond. This is a challenge to you guys. And I think it stems, of course, from early attachment experiences. Because you bond with your primary caregiver. And if you have a safe caregiver, then you feel safe being vulnerable. But if you had a caregiver early on that was inconsistent, that you found scary, you were scared of a caregiver, you were unsafe, you developed this fear of vulnerability, and you're scared of being rejected, you're scared of betrayal. So trust becomes a balance between our desire to connect and our innate ability to protect ourselves. So the thing is that when your arm is broken, you're going to go to a legitimate hospital and see a legitimate doctor. You're not going to go down the street to somebody who's not a doctor. Why would you show yourself to someone who ain't even qualified to check your arm? You have to choose. You have to pick. We talked about that in chapter 3. What chapter is that? How to find a partner? Y'all need to get the recordings. I'll talk to you guys maybe next week about how to get some of the recordings because I've collected all of the recordings. The recordings of this book club is all over the internet. I don't know. It's all sorts of YouTube pages. So it's not consistent in terms of how to get the recordings, but I think it's chapter 3, how to find a partner. Yes, finding a partner. We talked about that in chapter 3. Chapter 3 teaches you when your arm is broken, how do you find a hospital? How do you find a qualified doctor? That's chapter 3. So, but when you go to a hospital and your arm is broken, you can be vulnerable with them because they're credentialed. So, chapter 3 talks about how to find a partner. But once you find a partner, you have to be courageous. You have to take the risk because that's only how you're going to grow. Anyway, that's only how you're going to grow. Okay, so let's move on. Likewise, we are on page 199. Likewise, our vulnerability may have a history of betrayal. Okay, now he's talking about it now. We were vulnerable to someone we trusted, and we were then hurt by that person. Now, that traumatic event makes vulnerability and trust seem dangerous ever after. Wow. You're thinking about the past, and rightfully so. It hurts to make yourself vulnerable to somebody and then they violate that. That is painful, very, very painful. So it makes sense. The last doctor I went to didn't fix my arm. I showed them my vulnerability and they made it worse. They weren't a real doctor. Happens. So you go ahead and you're a little cautious. Okay. All right, let's read on. All this helps us see why it might be scary to receive the 5 A's. It is scary to receive it. Um, it will it will mean being looked into, maybe for longer than we can stand, maybe from someone who may fail us later. Yeah, because there's no perfect relationship. There's no perfect relationship. It is possible that your partner will let you down, but you have to make yourself vulnerable anyway. It is always possible because you can't control everything. You have to let go of that. Okay. As an aside, we all have different levels of willingness to be looked into. Some of us find being seen invasive at any level, scared to get close to anybody. Those people are very lonely, by the way. Um, some of us welcome the deepest inquiry into ourselves. Some people are way more open than others. It is important for partners to know one another's level of tolerance. Ultimately, it is about boundaries around our core self and how rigid or how diaphanous we may want them to be. This is not simply a trust issue. Some of us do not want anyone, no matter how trustworthy, to know us all the way. Okay. I don't know. I got no comment on that one. I have nothing to say. That's just is what it is. And you got to find somebody that you feel comfortable with. You would like you would like to have someone equally yoked in that way, somebody who feels way more comfortable with the same level of vulnerability that you're comfortable giving. Okay. Unconditional love is love without the condition, the face of ego, FACE. Such love is free of fear, including that of vulnerability. When we love unconditionally, attachment turns into healthy, committed, intelligent bonding. We establish and maintain ties, but do not become possessive, nor do we let ourselves be possessed. Instead of trying to control a partner, we respect his boundaries and thereby gain his respect. Entitlement gives way to a self-nurturant assertiveness. that gracefully bows to the fact that we do not always get what we want. Sometimes you win, and sometimes you will lose. Life does not guarantee that you're always going to win. So that's a given. Stop expecting to win everything. I had to learn that the hard way. You're not going to win everything. This admirable quality not only brings us to the respect of others, but self-respect too. Okay, the Tibetan, oh, they're going back to Buddhism. Okay, the Tibetan Buddhist scholar Robert Thurman says the best time to observe the ego is during episodes of injured innocence. Injured innocence. Another time is during road rage. That's funny. When we express feelings of entitlement to fairness or exemption from any condition of existence, that is evidence of ego energy in us. So you feel like life is supposed to be, life ain't supposed to be a crystal stair. What is that, Langston Hughes? Life hasn't been a crystal staircase. It's had, I don't know, what did he say? I don't know. It's just raggedy staircase for him. I can't remember the name, the entire poem. I used to have it memorized at one point, but life hasn't been a crystal stair. Okay. Where am I? Buddhism. When we express feelings of entitlement to fairness or to exemption from any condition of existence, that is evidence of ego energy in us. We know this kind of energy is not healthy because it makes us feel stressed. You're stressed out. You're not being realistic. We feel hurt. Why you hurt? You ain't supposed to always get what you want, right? Compulsive, frustrated, and intimidated. I like Buddhism. I'm not a Buddhist, but I like some of the mindful practices that Buddhism teaches. And he's talking about the injured innocence, injured innocence. Yeah, so these moments arise when you're kind of naive and you take these moments, let's see, you feel entitled to fairness or you believe you're exempt from human conditions. Who told you that you are exempt from basic human conditions, which is you're going to have pain in your life? It's inevitable. So get it out of your head. There's going to be painful experiences that you will definitely experience. You have to come to terms with the fact that you can't really shield yourself from it. So the ego is a facade. You think that you can hide, but you can't hide. Yeah, it's risky, Vernell, but you have to take the risk. And when you put this ego of arrogance up, the thing is that if only it worked, being arrogant doesn't even work. You can't really shield yourself. You cannot shield yourself from experiencing pain. Thinking that you can do that is a manifestation of the ego energy. And that is not healthy because it can lead to negative emotional states. And what was those states? He talked about it leads to feeling stressed. Y'all feel stressed? Y'all feel hurt? You're frustrated? You're compulsive? Fear of intimidation? All of these things that stress you out. These things that hurt you. It's the ego. You will be disappointed by your partner. Always. You are always going to disappoint your partner. At some point in your relationship with another person, you will disappoint them. It's inevitable. But you have to be willing to say, I apologize for that. I shouldn't have done that. I'm going to do better. All of that takes humility to be able to do that. And that is going to be done in a mindful practice, balanced state of mind. That's a process of inner peace, self-awareness, confidence in who and what you are. That's how you transcend. It's a transcendent feeling. process to have peace, self-awareness, insights into yourself, and a mindful way in which you go forward. Okay, let's move on from Buddhism. Buddhism. Okay, what is the difference between ego entitlement and a legitimate sense of one's ego, one's rights? Okay, so yeah, so it's a fine line between I feel like I'm entitled to 100% level of um, exemption from pain versus, okay, this is too much pain and I need to stand up for myself. So, what's the fine line there? Entitlement is an expectation, an attachment, a demand. So, entitlement is almost like I demand to always do one of these things. Always need to be entitled. So it's a demand. The familiar ego manifestations and mindsets that cause suffering and are opposite of mindfulness. Okay. If such an expectation is not met, we feel justified in retaliating. Retaliation is not justice. It is mean-spirited comfort to an indignant ego. I hate people. Just because you did it to me, you got to do it back. I do not like, and I'm sorry about this, but I do not like parents who tell their children, you go out there, somebody hit you, somebody punch you punch them 5 times. You're going to do that to somebody. Those are the type of parents to have children to end up going to prison. I said it. I do not tell my children that. I talk to my children about how to avoid fights. I talk to my children about how to become a friend. That's what I encourage my children to do. Now, if your back's against the wall, yeah, you're going to have to fight, but it's not retaliatory. So I don't send my children out of the house and tell them somebody hit you, you hit them back. No. I talk to my children about how to become friends with somebody. I talk to my children about fairness. I talk to my children about empathy. I talk to my children about feeling good about themselves and confident in who they are and all of these things. That's what I focus my conversations on when my children leave out the house. I just don't like that. It never sat right with me. My parents never told, by the way, I was having a conversation with my husband the other day, and he just looked at me like I was crazy. And I was like, I have never been in a fight. He's like, what? I said, I've never been in a fight. I've never had anybody hit me out of anger. Never. My parents didn't hit me out of anger. Nobody in my, I know it's weird, right? I never had anybody, but when I think about it, I know I grew up strange, I grew up different. Both my parents were therapists, and even my stepmom was a therapist. I don't know. I just grew up different, I think, from a lot of people, but I never got spankings to my knowledge. I don't remember. Who knows what the subconscious mind does, can block out. But to my knowledge, I don't ever remember getting spanked. I do remember getting on punishment, but I was never like spanked or hit. I've never been hit. No one's ever, no man, Boyce has never hit me, of course. My first husband never was physically abused. Like I've never dated, I never had that. And I'm not saying that to say that I ain't better than nobody or nothing like that. I'm just saying that to say that just fighting wasn't something that I grew up around. I didn't grow up around a lot of fighting. I grew up around a lot of hugs. There was always somebody hugging you. It was a little too much sometimes, but that was just my environment. So I wasn't even in that frequency. That frequency just never, I just didn't have that frequency. That's all I can say. I don't know. That's something for you to think about. Contemplate that. Just something for you to think about. Because retaliation is mistakenly perceived as a form of justice. And I think that's a mistake. To me, retaliation encourages cycles of harm and encourages conflict in a way that's negative conflict. So true justice requires rising above impulsive reactions and appealing to a higher authority. Fairness, wisdom, impartiality, all of those things. Um, I don't know. I think practicing mindfulness, we can just observe our emotions, but not becoming consumed by them. And to do that, it takes thoughtful awareness and not reacting. So somebody hit you, you just hit them back. That's just, I think it's important to think about and act in a way that's fair, that's compassionate, fosters resolution of problems. And what that does is that preempts any sort of escalated conflicts that can lead to physical harm. That's what I think. How y'all doing? Let me see if there are any questions. Oh, there's a question. Oh, yes, Jen. Fear, attachment, control. Oh, E is entitlement. Thank you, Jen. Jen's asking about E. E is entitlement. So thank you for that question. Okay. How y'all doing? Hi, hello, everybody in YouTube world. I do want to make an announcement before I close out for tonight. Um, Text the word love in YouTube world, LOVE to 87948, and then you can answer your questions. We've had a couple of questions here, but you can only get them answered. You can only get your shout out if you come into the Zoom. It's free, doesn't cost you anything, just a text message. And then you get all this cool information from me about healthy relationships because I'm all about love and I'm all about healthy relationships. So there we go. All right. Be sure to do that. Let's move on. We're talking about retaliation and how that just doesn't work. So anyway, okay. Moving on. How to be an adult in relationships, the 5 keys to mindful loving, David Rico. And we are on page 200. Whew. And it is, oh my God, it's almost the top of the hour. It is late. Okay, let's try to get through this. Let me stop digressing and try to get through this. Okay. One caution. The ego was never meant to be annihilated. It was never meant to be annihilated. Only dismantled and rebuilt to make it more constructive. Hey, then and only then does intimacy become possible. Here are a few constructive responses we can use when we feel our ego being aroused. Whew. Okay, so he's given us some tools at this point. All right. So let's see. Um, let's see what he says. When I feel fear, I choose instead to love. So this is what he's saying, how you can reconstruct your ego because ego is functional. You can never really get rid of it. You have to have some balance and harmony. So if it's skewed in one direction, it could be arrogant. You can come across as arrogant. And if it's skewed in another direction, you can come off as impoverished ego. Impoverished ego, by the way, we're going to talk about that next week. But today, we're talking about it being skewed in one direction where you think you better than everybody. You walking around arrogant, blaming feminism for your divorce when you were arrogant. That's why you got divorced. Blaming broke ass men on why you don't have no man. No, you were being entitled. You felt like you were entitled to certain things. You're not entitled. Anyway, okay. So instead of fear, love. So when confronted with fear, when you recognize fear in yourself, choosing love allows you to transcend and to protect yourself. That's how you protect yourself. So love opens the path to understanding and connection, dissolving barriers that fear creates. Fear creates barriers, but love removes those barriers, and that's how you have connection. Okay. All right. When I feel attached, I choose to let go. So we feel attached. Let's see. You need to choose to let go. So this is liberating. You know, liberation comes from just letting go of some of the things you can't control. You gotta, both for ourselves and for those around. I mean, think about it. If you hold something too tightly, you suffocate it. So you release it, right? You release the attachment. Instead of attaching to it and holding on to it, you release attachment, and that's how things grow. A flower can't grow if you're holding on to it tight. You got to let it go, let the sunlight come in, let the water fall, and that's how you have growth. So there's a mutual respect there. Okay. What are they saying? Controlling. When I feel controlling, I will choose to grant freedom. Huh. Okay. So controlling. Let's see. The desire to control, remember, that stems from what? Feeling insecure. The desire to control comes from feelings of insecurity. But choosing to grant freedom instead empowers others, and that's how you build trust in your relationship. So you can't control everything. You just have to trust that it will work out. You have to trust your partner. Unless they give you good reason not to, you have to be trusting. You have to trust that doctor in that hospital to fix. You have to. You can't control everything. You're going to need a doctor at one point. I think that's what they're saying. Yeah, I think y'all get the drift. Y'all smart. Okay. When I feel entitled, I choose instead to see myself as equal. Oh, I like that. So, um, so moments of entitlement can challenge us to see other people as equal. I mean, think about it. We're all human, and humanity is what binds all of us. Nobody's better than another person. We all have this equal give and take with each other. I think this makes sense. All right. Okay. Every one of the ingredients of the neurotic ego is a source of pain. Ooh. Fear, attach, controlling, and entitlement is a source of pain. Remember, it's inevitable. It hurts to be so afraid that we are always on guard and yet always wounded. It is painful to have to hold our reins tightly. It is stressful to consistently try to control others. It hurts to face the conditions of existence without the promise of an exemption from them. You are not exempt from the pain, the possibility of the pain. You're not exempt from them. It will be tragic to die. It would be tragic to leave this world having successfully saved face in all of our relationships. Tragic. That's one of the regrettable things that people in hospice who are on their deathbed, when they talk about things that they regret, part of it is that they regret that they didn't love as deeply as they felt like they should have because of fear kept them from it. They were too worried about pain. They were too worried about people letting them down. They did not love freely. That is a regret. I work in hospice. I do palliative care. I just ended a contract with a hospice company, and I'm actually starting up another contract with another hospice company. It's a long story, but I'm a jack of all trades. But anyway, that's one of the regrets, that I did not love completely. That's tragic. Let go of the ego. Let yourself love. Yet, no matter how bad something about us may be, it also has a positive dimension. There's a kernel of goodness, an untapped potential in each element of the neurotic ego. Double-edged sword. It's a double-edged sword. So let's see the good things about some of this stuff. Okay. Fear. Prudent caution and intelligent assessment of danger. Fear is your friend. But when you keep it in check, fear transforms into prudent caution and intelligent assessment of potential dangers. It's stupid to just put yourself out there with a doctor that don't have a license. That's stupid. So fear is your friend, but you still have to go forward with caution and intelligent assessment of potential dangers. This is adaptive. It can guide you to make thoughtful decisions and navigate any challenges that come your way. Fear is your friend. Okay. Well, it needs to be your friend. You need to become friends with fear. Some of us aren't friends with, we're scared of fear. Can't be scared of fear. It's a signal to you that you need to proceed with caution. You need to check things. Fear keeps things in check. Attachment. Attachment, perseverance, and commitment to stay through hard times. So attaching is beautiful. It can evolve into commitment, drive. You could be steadfast. You can be supportive to your partner during difficult times. When things become very difficult, it's good to attach to a person because that's where the commitment comes in. Okay, double-edged sword here. Control, ability to get things done and be efficient at addressing, processing, and resolving. Okay, so the need for control, if you channel that need effectively, it can turn into your ability to get things done efficiently. So it can foster your ability, your capacity to address, to process, and to resolve issues. Sometimes control could be processing things. Cool. Okay, let's see entitlement. Entitlement, healthy self-esteem, and standing up for one's rights, but with a willingness to accept the given that sometimes things are unfair. Gosh, so entitlement is often criticized, but it can actually present healthy self esteem and your ability to stand up for what's right. But it has to be balanced with the understanding that life is just not always fair. Sometimes life is teaching you lessons. So you have to accept this reality. And doing that, it can demonstrate maturity. You have the wisdom to make this discernment. I like this. This is really great. Okay. Let me see if there's any question. No more questions. Okay. If you got questions, it's time to type it in there if you have it. But the last paragraph here today, to trust ourselves does not mean we can be sure we will face life without fear, attachment, control, and entitlement. To trust ourselves means that we have surrendered to being just exactly who we are in each moment. Successful people are able to do that, by the way. I was hanging out with very successful people this week in Harlem. I went to an event in Harlem and just being around winners. I realized that winners are often real comfortable with themselves and their vulnerabilities. You know, I just find that to be the case. It's very inspiring to me. But anyway, um, Let's see. To trust ourselves means we have surrendered to being just exactly who we are and in each moment, and that a mindful awareness will kick in to show us an alternative to our ego habits. Always checking for that. This is the spiritual paradox of accepting ourselves as we are while simultaneously becoming more than we ever were. That's the paradox. You got to accept yourself, who you are in this moment, but you always need to be aware that growth needs to always occur. Okay. It is a forsaking of any attachment to a polarity so that our only refuge is the center, not the polar, staying centered, where synthesis awaits us. Got to synthesize this. Today was heavier than I thought it was. I was not expecting all this today. Now that I think about it, there were some two paragraphs today that I felt was really profound. That's how I feel. All right, everybody. Okay, we're done. Look, it's the top of the hour. Y'all, we got to go to bed. I got to go to bed. I got to go to work tomorrow. Well, I have work to do tomorrow. So I got to go to sleep. I'm tired. I'm tired, y'all. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for staying up with me so late. It's late. It's late tonight. I appreciate y'all staying up tonight, especially people on the East Coast. It's really early over there on the East Coast. But be sure to um, I don't know. Just welcome to the book club. We're going to be meeting next week. Next week, we're going to talk about impoverished ego. People on YouTube, goodbye to you on YouTube. Hopefully, I will see you in the Zoom. So, everybody on YouTube right now, I see y'all on YouTube. I can see y'all. Join the book club, LOVE, text LOVE to 87948. You, yes, you. And it's free. So, you can just join and come on in. I don't know. I probably should charge y'all. Maybe I will. I don't know. But it's free for anybody who wants to come in. I'm not charging anybody. I don't know. I'm supposed to be a businesswoman, but not so much. Anyway, this has been fun for me. So I will see y'all next week. Next week is my daughter's recital, dance recital. But guess what? I'm going to be here and I'm going to talk about the impoverished ego. The ego's moved over to the one side here and what to do about it. See y'all. Bye bye.